The emergency beacon screamed across subspace frequencies like a wounded animal, its signal weak and distorted by the kind of damage that spoke of desperation. Admiral Cathara of the Zephyrian fleet received the transmission while conducting routine patrols along the Outer Rim territories, where civilized space met the chaotic unknown. "What manner of vessel broadcasts on such primitive frequencies?" she wondered aloud, her crystalline voice resonating through the command center. The Zephyrians had evolved from a silicon-based life form on a high-gravity world, giving them natural armor plating and incredible physical strength. Their technology was elegant, efficient, and had remained largely unchanged for 3,000 years because it had already achieved perfection. Lieutenant Voss, her communications officer, manipulated the holographic displays with movements that would have been impossible for most organic species. "The signal appears to originate from an unknown vessel approximately 47 light minutes from our current position. The distress call is peculiar, Admiral." Cathara's head turned with the grinding sound of stone against stone. "Elaborate." "They're requesting asylum, Admiral. Not assistance with repairs, not rescue from a disaster. Asylum. The message is broadcast in 17 different languages, none of which match any known galactic dialects. This was unusual. In the Admiral's experience, species that achieved faster-than-light travel had already made contact with galactic civilization or were advanced enough to not require asylum from anyone. She decided to investigate personally. The journey to the coordinates took 3 hours at standard cruise velocity. What they found defied immediate explanation. The vessel, if it could truly be called that, appeared to be constructed from a patchwork of different materials. Plating that looked like it had been salvaged from dozens of different sources, engine configurations that violated several basic principles of efficient design. Most disturbing of all, the ship showed signs of atmospheric breach that had been repaired with what appeared to be industrial adhesive and metal sheeting. "Life signs aboard the vessel?" Cathara inquired. "Approximately 12,000, Admiral. The readings are confusing. The life forms appear to be carbon-based, but their vital signs are erratic, heart rates fluctuating wildly, neural activity spiking and dropping unpredictably. If I didn't know better, I'd say they were all dying." Cathara considered her options. First contact protocols demanded caution, but these beings were clearly refugees from some catastrophe. Her decision was made easier when a new transmission reached them, this one containing crude visual data. The screen flickered to life, revealing what was unmistakably an attempt at communication from a previously unknown species. The being that appeared on screen was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Bipedal, certainly, but lacking any obvious evolutionary advantages. No armor plating, no enhanced musculature, no visible sensory apparatus beyond 2 small optical organs. The creature's skin appeared to be some sort of flexible covering rather than proper protection, and it seemed to be leaking fluid from its optical organs. "Greetings," the being said in a language that the universal translator struggled to process. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth vessel Concordia. We are refugees from our home system. Our planet has become uninhabitable due to ecological collapse. We seek asylum in your territory and offer our complete cooperation with any galactic authorities." The transmission cut out for several seconds before resuming with obvious technical difficulties. "We understand we may appear primitive to your civilization. We offer what little we have in exchange for the right to exist somewhere in your space. We have approximately 12,000 survivors aboard this vessel and 2 smaller escort ships. We have no weapons that would pose a threat to advanced civilizations, and we are willing to submit to any reasonable terms for sanctuary." Admiral Cathara found herself experiencing what humans might have recognized as pity. Here was clearly a species that had barely achieved spaceflight before some catastrophe destroyed their world. The vessel's construction suggested they had built their escape ships from whatever materials they could salvage, probably working under extreme time pressure as their planet died beneath them. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. "This is Admiral Cathara of the Zephyrian fleet. We have received your request for asylum. Prepare to be boarded for standard health and security inspections. Do not be alarmed by this procedure." The human captain's relief was visible even across species barriers. "Thank you, Admiral. We understand and will comply completely. Should we power down our defensive systems?" "That will not be necessary. Our scans indicate your vessel poses no threat to our ships." What Admiral Cathara didn't realize was that she had just made the first of many critical errors in assessing humanity. The humans did indeed have defensive systems, quite sophisticated ones actually, but they were designed according to principles no other galactic species had ever needed to develop. Humans had learned to hide their capabilities, to appear weak when they were actually gathering intelligence, to submit when they were actually analyzing their opponent's weaknesses. The boarding party consisted of 6 Zephyrian soldiers in standard combat armor, equipment that could withstand direct hits from most known energy weapons. They were prepared for potential biological hazards, primitive projectile weapons, or even psychic attacks. They were not prepared for what they actually encountered. The airlock opened to reveal Captain Chen waiting alone in what appeared to be a cargo bay. She was even smaller than the visual transmission had suggested, barely reaching the chest plates of the Zephyrian soldiers. Her clothing was obviously utilitarian rather than ceremonial, and she carried no visible weapons. Everything about her posture suggested submission and cooperation. "Welcome aboard the Concordia," she said, her voice calm despite the obvious stress she had to be experiencing. "I'm prepared to escort you wherever you need to go and answer any questions you might have." Lieutenant Commander Thex, leading the boarding party, activated his scanner array. The readings were immediately concerning. "Captain Chen, our instruments indicate massive overcrowding aboard your vessel. The atmospheric composition is barely suitable for your species, and we're detecting numerous hull breaches that have been temporarily sealed." Captain Chen nodded sadly. "We had very little time to evacuate Earth. We packed as many people as we could into ships that were never designed for long-term habitation. We've been traveling for 8 months now, and our resources are nearly exhausted." What the Zephyrians couldn't know was that Captain Chen was telling them exactly what they expected to hear, while carefully omitting crucial details. Yes, Earth had suffered ecological collapse, but it had been a slow process spanning decades. Yes, the ships were crowded and resources were limited, but that was a choice made to appear maximally sympathetic to potential benefactors. And yes, they had been traveling for 8 months, but they had made stops at 17 different star systems during that time, gathering intelligence about galactic civilization while maintaining their cover as helpless refugees. As the inspection continued, the Zephyrians documented exactly what they expected to find: a desperate species with primitive technology trying to survive in a hostile galaxy. The humans answered every question with perfect cooperation, provided complete access to their databases, and demonstrated no capabilities that could be considered threatening. Commander Thex's report to Admiral Cathara was straightforward. Refugee species, technological level approximately equivalent to early galactic standard, no apparent military capabilities, no dangerous pathogens, no psychic abilities. Population consists entirely of non-combatants. Recommend granting temporary asylum pending council review. What none of the Zephyrians noticed was that during their 3-hour inspection, the humans had conducted their own complete scan of Zephyrian technology, biology, and military procedures. Captain Chen's cooperative demeanor had masked one of the most sophisticated intelligence-gathering operations in human history. While the Zephyrians saw primitive refugees, the humans saw everything they needed to know about their potential benefactors: shield frequencies, weapons capabilities, command structure, psychological profiles, and most importantly, the universal tendency to underestimate anything that appeared weak. Admiral Cathara granted preliminary asylum and arranged for escort to the nearest council processing station. As the small human fleet followed her ships toward civilized space, she composed her initial report to Galactic Council Command. The transmission would take weeks to reach the central systems, but she wanted to give them advance notice of the unusual refugees. Species designate human. Origin planet designation Earth, Outer Rim territories. Population approximately 12,000 survivors requesting asylum due to planetary ecological collapse. Threat assessment negligible. Recommendation: grant standard refugee status pending placement in suitable colony worlds. She paused before adding a final observation. Note: despite primitive technology and obvious resource limitations, species demonstrates remarkable resilience and organizational capacity, may prove useful for low-skill labor positions or hazardous environment work. 3 weeks later, the report reached Counselor Prime Valex on the capital world of New Atlantica. He reviewed Admiral Cathara's assessment with a casual attention reserved for routine administrative matters. Refugee resettlement was a common enough occurrence, though usually involved species with at least basic galactic standard technology. Approve asylum request, he indicated to his aide. Assign them to Colony World Designation Kepler 442b. Standard resettlement package, basic technology transfers, monitoring protocols as per standard refugee regulations. Kepler 442b was what galactic civilization politely called a development world, a barely habitable planet where refugee species could attempt to rebuild their societies while providing useful resources to the galactic economy. The world was technically habitable for carbon-based life forms, but it was considered a hardship assignment by galactic standards. High gravity, unstable weather patterns, aggressive native wildlife, and mineral deposits that required dangerous extraction techniques. Most species assigned to Kepler 442b struggled for decades to achieve basic subsistence. Many never progressed beyond survival mode. It was considered an appropriate placement for primitive refugees, who should be grateful for any world that could support life. What Counselor Prime Velex didn't know was that by galactic standards, Kepler 442b was actually a paradise compared to Earth. The hostile environment that challenged other species was barely more difficult than what humans considered normal living conditions. The high gravity was less than humans had evolved under. The unstable weather was nothing compared to Earth's hurricane seasons. The aggressive wildlife was less dangerous than terrestrial predators humanity had been hunting for millennia. And the dangerous mining operations? Those were exactly the kind of hazardous industrial work that human civilization had been perfecting for centuries. Captain Chen received notification of their colony assignment with appropriate expressions of gratitude and relief. She thanked Admiral Cathara personally for her kindness and assured her that humanity would prove worthy of the Council's generosity. What she didn't mention was that she had already begun compiling detailed reports on galactic military capabilities, trade routes, resource distribution, and political structures, information that would prove invaluable when humanity was ready to reveal its true nature. The three-ship human fleet set course for Kepler 442b, broadcasting continuous thanks and humble acknowledgments of galactic generosity. Behind them, Admiral Cathara felt the satisfaction of a duty well performed. She had successfully processed another refugee species and directed them to appropriate settlement facilities. She never suspected that she had just given humanity exactly what they needed: a foothold in galactic civilization, detailed intelligence about galactic technology and politics, and most crucially, the galaxy's complete certainty that humans posed no threat whatsoever. As the human ships disappeared into hyperspace, Captain Shen stood on the bridge watching the stars stretch into lines of light. Around her, 12,000 human refugees prepared for the next phase of their mission, because they weren't refugees at all. They were the advanced scouts of a species that had been preparing for this moment for over 200 years, a species that had learned the most important lesson in the history of warfare. Your enemy can't defend against threats they refuse to see coming. The galaxy thought it was granting asylum to a group of desperate survivors. It had actually just invited humanity to move in next door. And humanity was about to show them exactly why evolution had spent 4 billion years teaching them that the most dangerous predators are the ones that don't look dangerous at all. 6 months after humanity's arrival on Kepler, 442b, Galactic Council observer Gentic submitted his first quarterly report with barely concealed frustration. The Vorthan administrator had been assigned to monitor human resettlement progress, a posting he considered punishment for some unnamed bureaucratic failure. Watching primitive refugees slowly starve on a hostile world was not how he had envisioned advancing his career. Human population status remained stable at approximately 12,000 individuals, he dictated to his recording system while staring out at the ramshackle settlement the humans had constructed. Survival rate exceeds predictions, though this is likely due to careful resource rationing rather than any particular adaptation to planetary conditions. What Observer Gentic couldn't see from his climate-controlled observation post was the intricate network of underground facilities that humanity had been constructing since their second week on the planet. While the surface settlement appeared to be the desperate improvisation of refugees making do with whatever they could salvage, the real human colony existed 30 meters below ground in a complex of tunnels and chambers that would have impressed galactic engineers. Captain Chen, now serving as colonial administrator, walked through the main underground thoroughfare reviewing status reports on a tablet that appeared to be cobbled together from salvaged components. In reality, the device was running quantum processing systems that exceeded galactic standard technology by several generations. Every piece of equipment the humans used had been deliberately designed to appear primitive while functioning at levels that would have shocked their observers. Mining operations report successful extraction of rare earth elements from Sector 7, reported Dr. James Harrison, the colony's chief geologist. We've identified deposits of materials that aren't even on the galactic periodic table. The Council's surveys were incredibly superficial. This was typical of what humans had discovered about galactic civilization. Impressive on the surface, but built on assumptions that led to massive blind spots. Galactic species had achieved faster-than-light travel and energy manipulation, but they had also grown complacent. When you could simply move to a new planet if the current one became inconvenient, you never developed the desperate efficiency that came from having nowhere else to go. Humans had evolved on a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill everything that lived on it. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, mass extinctions, climate shifts. Earth was a cosmic torture chamber that had produced the ultimate survivors. Every other galactic species came from worlds that were relatively stable, where evolution proceeded along predictable lines toward obvious advantages. "What's the status on the camouflage protocols?" Chen asked as they walked past workshops where humans were building equipment that appeared to be primitive jury-rigged contraptions, but actually represented some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy. "Observer Gentek remains completely unaware of our actual capabilities," Harrison replied. "His reports consistently describe us as struggling refugees barely managing subsistence survival. Meanwhile, our actual infrastructure development is ahead of schedule on every metric." This had been humanity's greatest gambit, appearing to struggle while actually thriving. The humans had deliberately made their surface settlement look like the desperate improvisation of refugees, while their real colony grew and developed far beyond what any galactic species had achieved in similar circumstances. Every interaction with their observer was carefully choreographed to reinforce the impression of harmless primitives grateful for galactic charity. Observer Gentek's daily routine involved checking atmospheric readings from the human settlement, monitoring their resource consumption, and filing reports about their slow progress toward basic subsistence. What he didn't know was that the humans had been monitoring him just as carefully, learning everything about galactic surveillance technology, administrative procedures, and most importantly, the limits of galactic attention spans. The Galactic Council was vast beyond comprehension, managing thousands of species across hundreds of star systems. Individual refugee settlements received minimal oversight once initial placement was completed. Observer Gentek's reports were filed in databases that were reviewed by automated systems looking for specific crisis indicators. As long as the humans appeared to be making slow but steady progress towards self-sufficiency, they would be largely ignored. This was exactly what humanity had been counting on. 3 months into their settlement, the humans had made contact with local wildlife that the galactic surveys had classified as extremely dangerous. The Council database described creatures called razorbacks as aggressive predators capable of tearing through standard galactic armor with their natural weapons. Previous refugee settlements had lost significant populations to razorback attacks, leading to protocols requiring expensive defensive barriers and military protection. The humans had solved the razorback problem in 2 weeks. "The pack dynamics are actually quite sophisticated," explained Dr. Sarah Martinez, the colony's xenobiologist, as she walked through the sections of underground complex dedicated to animal research. "They're not mindless predators at all. They're highly intelligent social hunters with complex territorial behaviors." What Dr. Martinez had discovered was that razorbacks were roughly equivalent to terrestrial wolves, if wolves had been the size of bears, and evolved natural armor plating. To galactic civilization, they were an incomprehensible threat. To humans, they were basically large dogs with attitude problems. Within a month of first contact, the humans had established communication protocols with the local razorback packs. Within 2 months, they had working agreements for shared territory usage. By the 3rd month, razorback packs were actively cooperating with human mining operations in exchange for food-sharing arrangements. Observer Gentek's reports noted the remarkable absence of razorback attacks on the human settlement, attributing this to unusual luck and careful avoidance of known hunting territories. He never suspected that the humans were actually working in partnership with the creatures that had terrorized previous galactic settlements. The mining operations provided the most dramatic example of the gap between human capabilities and galactic assumptions. Kepler 442b contained valuable mineral deposits that were considered too dangerous to extract using standard galactic techniques. The unstable geology, unpredictable weather patterns, and hostile wildlife made large-scale mining operations economically unfeasible for most galactic species. Humans had been mining in similar conditions on Earth for over a century. "Production numbers look good," reported Chief Mining Engineer Robert Kim as he reviewed operations data in the main command center. "We're extracting more rare minerals in a month than Council projections suggested would be possible in a year, and we're doing it with primitive equipment that looks like we built it from scrap metal." The human mining operations used techniques that appeared to be desperate improvisation, but were actually highly sophisticated applications of human engineering principles. Tunneling methods that looked crude but were incredibly efficient. Equipment that appeared jury-rigged but was actually precisely calibrated for the specific geological conditions. Safety protocols that seemed primitive but actually resulted in 0 fatalities despite working in conditions that galactic civilization considered impossibly hazardous. Observer Gentic dutifully reported that the human refugees were attempting basic mineral extraction to supplement their survival needs. His reports noted that their methods appeared primitive but seemed to be meeting basic subsistence requirements. He recommended continued monitoring but no intervention, as the refugees appeared to be adapting to their circumstances better than expected. What he didn't report, because he never investigated thoroughly enough to discover it, was that human mining operations were producing enough rare minerals to supply a small fleet of starships, materials that were being carefully stockpiled in underground facilities that Observer Gentic never knew existed. The humans had also made remarkable progress in understanding galactic technology, but this research was completely invisible to their observer. Dr. Alina Rodriguez, the colony's chief engineer, had been conducting detailed analysis of every piece of galactic equipment they could access. Their energy systems are incredibly inefficient by our standards, she reported during the weekly senior staff meeting held in the main conference chamber 3 levels underground. They've achieved impressive absolute power levels, but they're wasting enormous amounts of energy through design choices that prioritize elegance over function. This was another fundamental difference between human and galactic approaches to technology. Galactic civilization had developed in an environment of abundant resources and unlimited expansion. Their technology was designed to be impressive and beautiful, demonstrating the superiority of advanced civilization. Human technology had evolved under conditions of scarcity and constant threat, leading to designs that prioritized effectiveness over aesthetics. "What about their defensive systems?" asked Captain Shen. "Sophisticated but predictable," Rodriguez replied. "They've optimized for threats they understand. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, electromagnetic pulse attacks, but they've never had to defend against anything truly unconventional. The reason for this was simple. Galactic warfare had become ritualized over thousands of years of civilization. Conflicts were fought according to established rules using recognized technologies. No galactic species had ever developed the human approach to warfare, which was based on the principle that there are no rules and everything is a potential weapon. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting opponents that didn't follow any rules, diseases that evolved specifically to kill them, predators that had no concept of fairness, natural disasters that struck without warning, and eventually other humans who were just as clever and just as desperate. This had produced a species that approached conflict from angles that other species literally couldn't conceive of. The humans were also gathering intelligence about galactic society through methods that their observers couldn't detect. Every interaction with Galactic Council personnel was carefully documented and analyzed. Communication intercepts provided insight into political structures and military capabilities. Trade data revealed economic vulnerabilities and resource dependencies. "The galactic economy is much more fragile than they realize," reported Dr. Mouse. Lisa Chang, the colony's political analyst. "They've achieved stability through specialization. Each species focuses on what they're naturally suited for and trades with others for everything else. But this means that disrupting just a few key systems could cascade through their entire civilization. This was information that wouldn't matter to most refugee species struggling for basic survival. But humans weren't actually refugees, and they weren't struggling. They were conducting the most comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history while maintaining perfect cover as harmless primitives. By the end of their first year on Kepler, 442b, the humans had achieved something unprecedented in galactic refugee history. They were actually thriving in conditions that had challenged every previous settlement. Observer Gentic's reports noted their remarkable adaptation and suggested that humans might prove useful for colonizing other difficult worlds. What he didn't know was that the humans had been in communication with Earth throughout their entire settlement period. Quantum communication systems that appeared to be primitive radio equipment had been maintaining constant contact with humanity's home system, where the real Earth had been busy preparing for the next phase of their plan. Because the ecological collapse that had driven humanity from Earth was entirely fictional, Earth was actually more prosperous and technologically advanced than ever, having spent 2 centuries preparing for contact with galactic civilization. The refugees on Kepler 442b were volunteers, the advanced scouts of a species that had studied galactic civilization for decades through careful observation and long-range surveillance. Captain Shen stood in the main command center, reviewing reports that painted a picture of remarkable success. The colony was self-sufficient in all essential resources, had established positive relationships with indigenous wildlife, was producing surplus minerals for export, and had gathered comprehensive intelligence about galactic civilization. Most importantly, they had achieved all of this while maintaining perfect operational security. The galaxy still saw them as harmless refugees, grateful for the opportunity to survive on a barely habitable world. "Status report on the next phase?" Chen asked her senior staff. "The additional settlement ships from Earth are ready to launch," reported Dr. Harrison. 50,000 more refugees requesting placement on other difficult worlds throughout galactic space. Each group will follow the same protocols we've established here. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Phase 1 of humanity's galactic integration plan had succeeded beyond their most optimistic projections. They had proven they could not only survive in galactic civilization but actually excel while maintaining complete operational security. Phase 2 would involve establishing human settlements throughout galactic space, each one appearing to be struggling refugee communities while actually serving as intelligence gathering and resource production centers. 50 worlds, each following the same pattern that had worked so perfectly on Kepler 442b. And Earth's assessment of galactic defensive capabilities? Command believes that galactic civilization could not withstand a coordinated assault by a sufficiently motivated adversary, Doctor. Rodriguez reported. Their technology is impressive, but their strategies are predictable. They've never faced an opponent that refuses to follow established rules of engagement. This wasn't a plan for conquest, exactly. Humans had learned enough about galactic civilization to know that it was generally benevolent and rarely oppressive. But humanity had also learned the most important lesson in their species' history. No matter how peaceful your neighbors appear today, you need to be prepared for the day when that changes. And when that day came, if it ever came, humanity would be ready. Observer Gentic filed his final quarterly report with a note of personal satisfaction. The human refugee settlement had proven more successful than anyone had predicted. They were approaching basic self-sufficiency and might even become minor contributors to galactic trade within a few years. He recommended reducing oversight to annual reviews and closing active monitoring of the settlement. His recommendation was approved without comment. 12,000 human refugees on a remote colony world were no longer considered worth detailed attention, which was exactly what humanity had been hoping for all along. As Observer Gentic departed for his next assignment, Captain Chen watched his shuttle disappear into hyperspace from the surface settlement that still looked like a desperate refugee camp. Around her, the facade of struggling survivors continued their daily routines, maintaining the performance that had become second nature. 30 meters below their feet, the real human colony continued its work preparing for humanity's true debut on the galactic stage. A debut that would teach the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous threats are the ones that spend years convincing you they don't exist. The countdown to Phase 3 had begun. 2 years after the first human settlement on Kepler, 442b, the galaxy received a distress call that would change everything. The signal came from the Xerion Mining Consortium, a massive corporate operation extracting precious metals from the asteroid belt of the Altair system. The message was brief but terrifying. Under attack by unknown hostiles. Conventional defenses ineffective. Request immediate military assistance. Fleet Admiral Korvax of the Hegemony received the alert while conducting training exercises near the core worlds. The Hegemony had maintained galactic peace for over a millennium through overwhelming technological superiority and strategic positioning of their fleets. Attacks on major industrial installations were virtually unheard of. Analysis of the distress signal? He demanded from his bridge crew. Extremely unusual, Admiral, reported his intelligence officer, a Menthari with enhanced cognitive processing capabilities. The attackers appear to be using unconventional tactics. No energy signatures matching known weapons technologies. No ship configurations in our databases. This was the first sign that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy, though Admiral Korvax didn't realize it yet. The Hegemony database contained detailed information on every known spacefaring civilization and their military capabilities. An unknown hostile force was theoretically impossible. The Hegemony response fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers equipped with the most advanced weapons technology in galactic civilization. Their shields could withstand direct hits from stellar-class energy weapons. Their targeting systems could track and destroy thousands of projectiles simultaneously. Their crews were trained to handle any conceivable threat. When they arrived at the Altair system, they found the Xerion Mining Consortium facility completely destroyed. 37 mining stations, 6 defensive platforms, and a garrison fleet of 40 ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The attackers were gone, leaving no trace except the devastation they had caused. How is this possible? Admiral Korvax wondered aloud as his ships surveyed the destruction. The defensive capabilities of this facility should have been more than adequate to repel any known hostile force. What Admiral Korvax couldn't know was that the attacking force hadn't used any known technologies because they had specifically developed their weapons systems to exploit the predictable nature of galactic defensive strategies. But the attackers had studied galactic military doctrine for years and designed countermeasures for every standard defensive protocol. The attack on the Zirion facility had been carried out by ships that looked like converted merchant vessels, using weapons that appeared to be improvised modifications of industrial equipment. No energy signatures that would trigger standard threat assessment protocols. No ship configurations that would be recognized by galactic military databases. But the improvised appearance was as much a deception as everything else about the attackers. The ships were purpose-built combat vessels designed to look harmless. The weapons were precisely engineered systems designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities in galactic technology. And the tactical approach was the result of centuries of human military innovation. Because the attackers were human. 3 days after the Zirion incident, Admiral Korvax received intelligence reports that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Similar attacks had occurred simultaneously at 7 different locations throughout galactic space. Mining facilities, trade stations, and military outposts had been destroyed by unknown hostiles using similar tactics. Pattern analysis indicates coordinated strikes by a single hostile organization, reported his intelligence officer. The attacks were precisely timed to maximize strategic impact while minimizing defensive response capability. Admiral Korvax studied the tactical data with growing concern. This level of coordination suggested a sophisticated military organization with detailed intelligence about galactic operations. But no known hostile civilization had the capability to launch simultaneous attacks across such vast distances. The answer to this mystery was actually quite simple, though it would be weeks before galactic intelligence services figured it out. The attacks had been carried out by human settlements that had been requesting refugee placement on difficult worlds for the past 2 years. 50 different human colonies, each one appearing to be struggling refugee communities, had simultaneously revealed their true nature as advanced military installations. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the command center of what galactic observers still believed was a primitive refugee settlement. Around her, displays showed real-time data from the coordinated attacks that had just announced humanity's presence to the galaxy in unmistakable terms. All strike teams report successful mission completion, announced Dr. Harrison, who had traded his mining engineer persona for his actual role as military coordinator. Strategic targets eliminated with 0 casualties among human forces. The attacks had been carefully selected to demonstrate human capabilities without causing unnecessary loss of life. Mining facilities and trade stations had been evacuated before destruction. Military targets had been disabled rather than destroyed. The message was clear. Humans could strike anywhere in galactic space, but they weren't interested in genocide. Galactic response? Chen asked. Hegemony fleets are mobilizing from 17 different sectors, reported Dr. Belli. Rodriguez monitoring communications intercepts. They're treating this as a full-scale military crisis. Emergency council sessions have been called on New Atlantica. This was exactly what humanity had been hoping for. Phase 3 of their plan required galactic civilization to recognize humans as a legitimate threat, not helpless refugees. The coordinated attacks had achieved this goal while also demonstrating that humanity had been systematically underestimated for the past 2 years. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session 12 hours after the first reports reached New Atlantica. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Grand Assembly to discuss the unprecedented crisis facing galactic civilization. Counselor Prime Valex called the session to order with visible anxiety. In his 3 centuries of service to the Council, he had never faced a situation where unknown hostiles could strike simultaneously across galactic space. Intelligence assessment indicates coordinated attacks by an unknown military organization, he announced to the Assembly. Conventional defensive measures proved completely ineffective. We are facing a threat unlike anything in recorded galactic history. What followed was hours of increasingly frustrated discussion as the greatest minds in galactic civilization tried to understand what they were facing. Military experts presented analyses of the attack methods but couldn't explain how such primitive-appearing weapons had been so effective. Intelligence specialists reviewed surveillance data but couldn't identify the origin of the attacking forces. The breakthrough came when Counselor Zenth of the Altarian Republic requested access to refugee settlement records for the past 2 years. I propose we examine the possibility that these attacks are related to recent refugee settlements, she announced to the Assembly. The timing suggests a possible correlation. This suggestion was initially dismissed as paranoid speculation. Refugee species were carefully screened and monitored. They lacked the technological capability to threaten galactic civilization. The idea that primitive refugees could have evolved into a sophisticated military threat in just 2 years was considered absurd. But as the data analysis continued, disturbing patterns began to emerge. Human refugee settlements had been placed on 50 different worlds over the past 2 years. The attacks had originated from star systems containing human refugee settlements. And most damning of all, several of the attack sites had lost contact with their human refugee populations immediately before the strikes occurred. "This is impossible," declared military coordinator Thex during the emergency briefing. "We assessed human capabilities extensively during first contact. They lack the technological sophistication for coordinated military operations." Admiral Cathara, who had conducted the original first contact with humanity, reviewed her assessment reports with growing unease. Everything about human capabilities had been carefully documented and analyzed. They were primitive refugees with basic technology and no military assets, or so they had appeared. The truth was slowly becoming apparent to galactic intelligence services, though they still didn't understand the full scope of what they were facing. The human refugees had been anything but refugees. Every settlement had been a military installation disguised as struggling survivors. Every interaction with galactic authorities had been carefully orchestrated to reinforce the impression of harmless primitives. Humanity had spent 2 years infiltrating galactic civilization while gathering comprehensive intelligence about galactic capabilities, vulnerabilities, and defensive strategies. The coordinated attacks weren't the beginning of a war, they were a demonstration of how thoroughly humanity had compromised galactic security without anyone noticing. Captain Chen received a priority transmission from Earth Command as the galactic response developed. The message was brief but significant. Phase 3 successful. Initiate Phase 4 protocols. Stand by for diplomatic contact. Phase 4 represented humanity's transition from covert operations to open diplomacy. The galaxy now knew that humans were not helpless refugees, but they still didn't understand what humanity actually wanted or how dangerous they really were. That was about to change. The UEV Concordia, the same ship that had carried humanity's first refugees to galactic civilization, materialized in the new Atlantica system broadcasting diplomatic protocols. But the ship that emerged from hyperspace bore no resemblance to the desperate refugee vessel that had requested asylum 2 years earlier. The Concordia now appeared in its true configuration, a battleship that incorporated the most advanced human military technology with innovations derived from 2 years of studying galactic systems. Its hull gleamed with armor plating that could absorb energy weapon strikes. Its weapons arrays were clearly visible and obviously sophisticated. Most unsettling of all, its design incorporated elements that were clearly of galactic origin, suggesting that humanity had not only studied galactic technology but improved upon it. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth vessel Concordia, requesting permission to address the Galactic Council," came the transmission that reached New Atlantica's traffic control. The response was immediate and panicked. Emergency protocols activated throughout the system as defensive fleets mobilized to intercept what was clearly a hostile vessel approaching the galactic capital. But before weapons could be targeted, Captain Chen transmitted a message that stopped all defensive actions cold. "Please be advised that this vessel is currently being escorted by 47 additional ships of varying configurations. All escort vessels are currently using advanced stealth technology and will become visible if hostile action is taken against this diplomatic mission." To prove the point, one of the escort vessels briefly deactivated its stealth systems, appearing on sensors long enough to demonstrate that it was indeed present before vanishing again. The implied threat was clear. Humanity had not only infiltrated galactic space with their refugee settlements, but they also had military forces capable of reaching the galactic capital undetected. Counselor Prime Valix authorized diplomatic landing procedures with the grim realization that galactic civilization was facing something unprecedented. Humanity had achieved strategic superiority without anyone noticing until they chose to reveal themselves. Captain Chen's address to the Galactic Council 3 hours later would be remembered as the moment when galactic civilization truly understood what they were dealing with. "Honorable members of the Galactic Council," she began, speaking from the central podium of the Grand Assembly while surrounded by the greatest political minds in the galaxy. "I am here to clarify several misconceptions about humanity that have apparently developed over the past 2 years." The silence in the chamber was absolute. Every representative understood that they were witnessing a historical moment. First, humanity is not a primitive refugee species. Earth is the thriving capital of an advanced technological civilization that has been observing galactic society for several decades. Our refugees were actually volunteer colonists sent to establish permanent human settlements throughout galactic space. This revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. Representatives who had personally approved refugee settlements realized that they had been systematically deceived by what they now understood was the most sophisticated intelligence operation in galactic history. Second, our recent military actions were not acts of war, but demonstrations of capability. We wanted to ensure that future diplomatic relationships would be based on mutual respect rather than galactic assumptions about human weakness. Captain Chen paused to allow the implications to sink in before continuing. Third, humanity wishes to establish formal diplomatic and trade relationships with galactic civilization. We have no interest in conquest or domination, but we also have no intention of accepting the subordinate status typically assigned to primitive species. The questions that followed revealed the full scope of galactic shock and confusion. How long had humanity been watching galactic civilization? How advanced was human technology really? What did humanity want from the galaxy? Captain Chen answered each question with precise honesty that only deepened the Assembly's understanding of how completely they had misjudged humanity. Humans had been observing galactic civilization for 80 years through long-range surveillance. Human technology was significantly more advanced than galactic standards in several key areas, and humanity wanted exactly what they had said: formal recognition as equals and the establishment of mutually beneficial relationships. The session concluded with Councillor Prime Valix's request for a recess to allow the Assembly to consider humanity's proposals. As representatives filed out to consult with their governments, the reality of the situation was becoming clear to everyone involved. Humanity had achieved something that should have been impossible. They had integrated themselves into galactic civilization as a dominant force while maintaining perfect operational security for 2 years. The species that had been dismissed as primitive refugees had revealed themselves as potentially the most dangerous civilization in the galaxy, not because they were aggressive or hostile, but because they had proven that galactic assumptions about technological advancement, military capabilities, and strategic thinking were fundamentally flawed. If humanity could deceive galactic civilization so completely, what other assumptions might be wrong? Captain Chen departed New Atlantica 6 hours later with preliminary agreements for formal diplomatic recognition and the establishment of embassy relationships. The 47 escort vessels that had remained invisible throughout her visit maintained their stealth as the human fleet departed, leaving galactic authorities to wonder exactly how many human ships had been operating undetected in their space. As the Concordia entered hyperspace, Captain Chen composed her report to Earth Command. Phase 4 had succeeded beyond their projections. Humanity was now recognized as a legitimate galactic power with formal diplomatic standing. But more importantly, galactic civilization now understood that humanity operated according to principles that other species couldn't predict or counter. The galaxy had learned to fear human capabilities without fully understanding what those capabilities actually were, which was exactly the position humanity had been working toward for over 2 centuries. The age of human expansion into galactic civilization had officially begun. And the galaxy was about to discover that their assumptions about evolutionary advantages, technological development, and strategic thinking had been catastrophically wrong from the very beginning. 6 months after humanity's dramatic revelation to the Galactic Council, the first real test of their claimed capabilities came from an unexpected source. The Kytherian Empire, a militaristic civilization that had remained outside Council authority for centuries, chose to interpret humanity's emergence as an opportunity rather than a threat. Emperor Vorth had built his empire on the principle that superior military force was the only currency that mattered in galactic politics. When intelligence reports reached his throne world describing humanity's infiltration of Council space, his reaction was not fear but excitement. Here was a species that understood the value of deception and strategic planning, potential allies in his long-term goal of galactic domination. "These humans have demonstrated exceptional cunning," he declared to his war council in the obsidian chambers beneath the Imperial Palace. "They achieved strategic positioning through misdirection rather than direct confrontation. Such thinking could prove valuable to the Empire." General Karith, his chief military advisor, was less optimistic. "My Emperor, the humans managed to deceive Council forces, but Council military doctrine has grown soft over centuries of peace. The Empire has maintained constant readiness for warfare. Our capabilities far exceed anything the humans encountered during their infiltration. Emperor Vorth's decision to test humanity's military capabilities would prove to be one of the most significant strategic errors in galactic history, though he wouldn't understand this until it was far too late to matter." The Kytherian probe began subtly. Imperial intelligence services attempted to gather information about human military installations, only to discover that their most advanced surveillance technology couldn't penetrate human defensive systems. Reconnaissance missions to human-settled worlds found colonies that appeared to be simple mining and agricultural operations, but sensor readings suggested hidden facilities that defied analysis. Most frustrating of all, attempts to infiltrate human communications networks revealed that humanity was using encryption methods that were theoretically impossible to break with existing galactic technology. Their security protocols are unlike anything we've encountered, reported Intelligence Director Vex during the weekly Imperial briefing. They appear to be using quantum entanglement communication systems that are significantly more advanced than our own. This was humanity's first major advantage: information security. While galactic civilization had developed impressive technologies, they had also grown complacent about operational security. Most species communicated openly, assuming that their technology was sufficiently advanced to prevent meaningful intelligence gathering by potential enemies. Humans had learned to assume that someone was always listening, always watching, always trying to find weaknesses. Their communication systems were designed to be impenetrable even by hostile forces with superior technology. Their operational procedures were built around the assumption that perfect security was impossible, so multiple layers of deception and misdirection were essential. When diplomatic overtures failed to gain useful intelligence, Emperor Vorth decided on direct action. A Kytherian battle group consisting of 6 heavy cruisers and 2 dreadnoughts was dispatched to the human settlement on Kepler 442b with orders to conduct military exercises that would allow detailed observation of human defensive capabilities. Captain Chen, now serving as humanity's primary military coordinator for the sector, received notification of the approaching Kytherian fleet through intelligence networks that the Empire didn't know existed. Human long-range sensors had been tracking Imperial ship movements for months, providing comprehensive data about Kytherian military capabilities and tactical doctrine. Analysis indicates this is a probing action rather than a genuine attack, reported Dr. Harrison during the emergency planning session convened in the underground command center that observer Gentic had never discovered. They want to assess our defensive capabilities without triggering a full-scale conflict. This presented humanity with a strategic opportunity. The Kytherians were expecting to observe primitive defensive systems that might reveal useful intelligence about human military technology. Instead, they were about to encounter defensive measures that had been specifically designed to counter galactic military doctrine. Recommendations for response? Chen asked her senior staff. Demonstrate capability without revealing capacity, suggested Dr. Rodriguez. Show them enough to discourage further probing, but not enough to allow comprehensive analysis of our actual defensive systems. The plan that emerged was typical of human strategic thinking. Multi-layered deception designed to control enemy perceptions while gathering maximum intelligence about their capabilities. The Kytherians would be allowed to observe human defensive systems, but everything they saw would be carefully orchestrated to create specific impressions while hiding humanity's true military potential. When the Kytherian battle group arrived at Kepler 442b, they found what appeared to be a lightly defended mining colony with basic defensive satellites and a small patrol fleet. The human response to their arrival seemed appropriately cautious but not panicked, suggesting defensive capabilities roughly equivalent to standard galactic norms. Admiral Korex, commanding the Kytherian probe, ordered his ships to begin navigation exercises that would bring them progressively closer to human defensive perimeters. This was standard Imperial doctrine for probing unknown defenses, gradual escalation designed to trigger defensive responses that could be analyzed for capabilities assessment. What Admiral Korex didn't realize was that his every movement was being monitored by sensors that his ships couldn't detect, and his tactical decisions were being analyzed by human military specialists who had spent months studying Kytherian military doctrine. Imperial probe following standard escalation protocols, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson, humanities tactical specialist, as he tracked the Kytherian ships from the hidden command center. Their approach vectors are predictable based on their published military manuals. This was another human advantage: comprehensive intelligence gathering. While other galactic species maintained operational security through technological superiority, humans maintained security through understanding their opponents better than their opponents understood themselves. The first phase of the Kytherian probe involved long-range sensor sweeps designed to map human defensive installations. Their sensors detected exactly what humanity wanted them to detect: a network of defensive satellites with energy weapons approximately equivalent to galactic standard technology, patrol ships with conventional armament, and ground-based defensive systems that appeared to be improvised from mining equipment. What the Kytherian sensors couldn't detect were the stealth platforms positioned throughout the system. the advanced missile systems hidden in asteroid mining facilities, or the fact that every piece of human equipment they could observe was actually a decoy designed to mask the real defensive network. Human defensive response appears minimal, Admiral Korax reported to Imperial Command. Colony defense networks show typical refugee species improvisation, military capabilities significantly below Imperial standards. This assessment was exactly what humanity had been hoping to achieve. The Kytherians were seeing primitive defenses managed by desperate colonists, not the sophisticated military installation that Kepler 442b had actually become. The second phase of the probe involved simulated weapons targeting to test human response protocols. Kytherian ships began painting human installations with targeting lasers while maintaining safe distances, a standard provocation designed to trigger defensive measures that could be analyzed. The human response appeared to follow predictable patterns. Defensive satellites activated targeting systems, patrol ships moved to intercept positions, and ground installations powered up energy weapons. Everything suggested a defensive doctrine based on conventional galactic military theory. What the Kytherians couldn't observe was that none of the human systems they were tracking were actually part of the colony's real defensive network. The satellites they were targeting were expendable decoys. The patrol ships they were monitoring were obsolete vessels maintained specifically for deception purposes. The ground installations they had mapped were dummy positions designed to draw fire away from actual defensive systems. Imperial forces appear to be accepting our deception completely, reported Commander Jackson as he monitored Kytherian responses to human defensive measures. Their tactical analysis is based on the assumption that what they can observe represents our actual capabilities. This was the fundamental flaw in galactic military thinking that humans had identified and planned to exploit, the assumption that superior sensor technology would provide accurate intelligence about enemy capabilities. Galactic species had grown accustomed to fighting opponents who couldn't hide their true capabilities, leading to military doctrines that relied heavily on pre-battle intelligence assessment. Humans had developed their military technology in an environment where camouflage, deception, and misdirection were essential for survival. Every human defensive system was designed to appear less capable than it actually was, while every offensive system was built to be invisible until the moment of attack. The third phase of the Kytherian probe crossed the line from intelligence gathering to active provocation. Admiral Korax ordered his ships to conduct defensive maneuvers that brought them within the engagement range of human defensive installations, a clear challenge that demanded response. The human reply was swift and precisely calculated. Defensive satellites opened fire with energy weapons that appeared to be operating at maximum capacity, but were actually functioning at less than 30% of their true capabilities. The attacks were accurate enough to demonstrate competence, but not so devastating as to suggest advanced technology. One Kytherian cruiser suffered minor shield damage from human defensive fire, exactly the result that humanity had been aiming for. The damage was significant enough to prove that human weapons could penetrate Imperial defenses, but not so severe as to suggest that human firepower exceeded galactic norms. Human weapons demonstrate adequate effectiveness against Imperial shielding, Admiral Korax reported after the engagement. Defensive capabilities appear sufficient for local security, but would not pose a significant threat to major Imperial operations. This assessment was transmitted to Emperor Vorth with the recommendation that humanity might be useful as auxiliary forces in Imperial military operations, but should not be considered a primary threat to Imperial expansion plans. Emperor Vorth's response was swift and decisive. Initiate diplomatic contact with human leadership. Offer alliance terms based on their demonstrated capabilities. The Imperial diplomatic mission that arrived at human space 2 weeks later was led by Ambassador Krell, a career diplomat with extensive experience in negotiating with lesser civilizations. His mandate was to offer humanity junior partnership status in the Kytherian Empire in exchange for military cooperation against Council forces. Ambassador Krell's meeting with Captain Chen took place aboard the Concordia, now serving as humanity's diplomatic flagship. The negotiations were conducted in the ship's main conference room, a space that had been carefully designed to appear impressive without revealing humanity's true technological capabilities. The Kytherian Empire recognizes humanity's potential as a military ally, Ambassador Krell announced as he presented the Imperial offer. We propose a formal alliance that would provide humanity with Imperial protection and access to advanced technologies in exchange for military cooperation in our expansion efforts. The terms of the proposed alliance were designed to appeal to what the Empire assumed were human motivations: protection from Council retaliation, access to galactic technology, and the opportunity to participate in conquest of weaker civilizations. From the Imperial perspective, it was a generous offer to a species that had demonstrated cunning but lacked the military strength to survive without Imperial support. Captain Chen's response was diplomatically perfect while revealing nothing about humanity's true intentions. The Empire's offer is intriguing and deserves careful consideration. However, humanity would need guarantees about our autonomy and territorial integrity before committing to any alliance. The negotiations that followed lasted 3 days and provided humanity with comprehensive intelligence about Imperial military capabilities, expansion plans, and political structures. Ambassador Krell, eager to secure human cooperation, shared detailed information about Imperial technology and strategic objectives. What Ambassador Krell didn't realize was that every piece of information he provided was being analyzed by human intelligence specialists, who were building a complete profile of Imperial vulnerabilities and weaknesses. The negotiations concluded with humanity's polite rejection of the Imperial Alliance offer. While we appreciate the Empire's recognition of human potential, Captain Chen explained, humanity prefers to maintain our independence while pursuing peaceful relationships with all galactic civilizations. Ambassador Krell departed with assurances of continued diplomatic contact and the understanding that humanity remained open to future cooperation. His report to Emperor Vorth described humans as potentially useful allies who were currently too cautious to commit to Imperial expansion, but might be persuaded by future negotiations. Emperor Vorth accepted this assessment and ordered continued monitoring of human activities while focusing Imperial attention on more promising opportunities for expansion. Humanity had successfully convinced the Catherian Empire that they were competent but not threatening, useful but not essential. This strategic deception bought humanity exactly what they needed: time to complete their integration into galactic civilization while avoiding premature conflicts with major military powers. What neither Ambassador Krell nor Emperor Vorth suspected was that humanity had used the diplomatic negotiations to plant sophisticated surveillance devices throughout Imperial space. The same quantum communication technology that had allowed human refugees to maintain contact with Earth now provided real-time intelligence about Imperial military movements and strategic planning. Captain Chen's report to Earth Command summarized the Catherian probe with satisfaction. Imperial assessment confirms effectiveness of our deception protocols. They continue to underestimate human capabilities while providing valuable intelligence about their own military systems. Recommend maintaining current strategic posture while expanding intelligence gathering operations. The Catherian probe had been intended to assess human military capabilities and identify potential weaknesses that could be exploited in future conflicts. Instead, it had provided humanity with comprehensive intelligence about one of the galaxy's most dangerous military powers while reinforcing galactic assumptions about human limitations. 6 months later, when the Catherian Empire launched their long-planned assault on Council territory, they discovered that every aspect of their strategy had somehow been anticipated by Council defenders. Imperial fleets found themselves walking into perfectly prepared ambushes. Their supposedly secret military installations came under attack by forces that seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum damage. Emperor Vorth never learned that the intelligence leak that destroyed his expansion plans had come from the species he had dismissed as useful but ultimately harmless. Humanity had turned the Catherian probe into an opportunity to demonstrate their value to galactic civilization by providing the Council with the intelligence needed to defeat the Imperial threat. The Catherian Empire's defeat established humanity's reputation as valuable allies while maintaining the impression that human contributions were primarily intelligence-based rather than direct military action. The galaxy learned to appreciate human strategic thinking without fully understanding the extent of human military capabilities, which was exactly the position humanity had been working towards since their first contact with galactic civilization. The species that had been dismissed as weak refugees had successfully manipulated two major galactic powers into providing them with everything they needed while never revealing their true strength. And humanity was just getting started. 3 years after first contact, the galaxy faced a crisis that would finally reveal the true nature of humanity's strength. It began with a signal from beyond the galactic rim, a transmission that shouldn't have existed from a region of space that was supposed to be empty. The message was detected simultaneously by monitoring stations throughout the galaxy, its origin point located in the void between galaxies where no known civilization had ever traveled. The signal itself was unlike anything in galactic databases, a complex pattern that repeated every 73 minutes with mathematical precision. Dr. Kethro Voss, the galaxy's leading xenolinguist, spent weeks analyzing the transmission from his laboratory on New Atlantica. His conclusion sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. The signal was unmistakably artificial, suggesting the existence of an unknown civilization with technology capable of intergalactic communication. The mathematical structure of the transmission indicates a level of technological sophistication that exceeds current galactic capabilities, he reported to the Emergency Council session. The power requirements alone suggest engineering capabilities beyond our current understanding. What followed was the largest mobilization in galactic history, as every major civilization contributed ships and resources to investigate the mysterious signal. The Joint Expedition Fleet consisted of over 300 vessels representing 47 different species, equipped with the most advanced exploration and scientific equipment in the galaxy. Captain Chen received notification of the expedition through humanity's intelligence networks 3 days before the public announcement. The message from Earth Command was brief but significant. Intergalactic contact imminent. Prepare for Phase 5 protocols. Humanity's participation in the expedition was expected but carefully limited. Their contribution was officially described as 6 exploration vessels with advanced sensor capabilities, commanded by Captain Chen aboard the Concordia. From the outside, it appeared that humanity was providing useful but not essential support to the galactic effort. The reality was considerably different. The 6 human ships represented the most advanced exploration technology in the galaxy, equipped with sensor systems that could detect and analyze phenomena that other galactic species couldn't even observe. More importantly, Earth had been monitoring the intergalactic signal for over 2 months before galactic civilization detected it, using deep space monitoring stations that officially didn't exist. The expedition fleet took 6 weeks to reach the signal's origin point in the void between galaxies. What they found challenged every assumption about what was possible with known physics. The source was a massive artificial structure, a space station of impossible proportions orbiting nothing in the empty space between galactic clusters. The structure was clearly ancient, its surface marked by damage that suggested it had been drifting in the void for millions of years. But it was still active, still broadcasting its mathematical signal across the cosmos. Preliminary analysis suggests the structure predates any known galactic civilization, reported the expedition's chief scientist as the fleet took position around the ancient station. The construction materials and engineering techniques are completely unknown. This represents a level of technological achievement that our civilization hasn't approached. Initial exploration attempts by galactic survey teams proved frustratingly unsuccessful. The station's defensive systems prevented conventional boarding attempts, and its hull material couldn't be penetrated by standard cutting tools. Sensor scans revealed vast internal spaces, but the detailed structure remained a mystery. It was Captain Chen who proposed a solution that would change everything. The mathematical signal appears to be some kind of communication protocol, she suggested during the expedition command meeting. Rather than attempting forced entry, we should try to establish communication using the station's own frequency patterns. This approach required computational capabilities that exceeded standard galactic equipment, but humanity's advanced processing systems were able to decode the signal's underlying structure and formulate an appropriate response. When the human ships transmitted their carefully crafted reply, the ancient station's response was immediate and dramatic. The station's defenses powered down, massive hangar bays opened across its surface, and a new signal began broadcasting in what was clearly an invitation for contact. The expedition fleet had achieved first contact with technology that was millions of years more advanced than anything in the galaxy. But as the joint exploration teams prepared to board the ancient station, humanity received a priority transmission from Earth Command that changed everything. Intergalactic contact confirmed. Station identification matches deep archive records. Implement final protocols immediately. What happened next revealed the deepest truth about humanity's place in the galaxy, a truth that would shatter every assumption galactic civilization had made about human origins, capabilities, and purpose. Captain Chen requested a private meeting with Admiral Cathara, who had been chosen to command the joint expedition. The meeting took place aboard the Concordia in the same conference room where humanity had conducted diplomatic negotiations with the Catharian Empire. "Admiral," Chen began, "before our teams board the station, there are some things about humanity that you need to understand. Things that we haven't been entirely honest about." Admiral Cathara had grown to respect human capabilities over the past 3 years, but she wasn't prepared for what Captain Chen revealed next. "Humanity didn't originate on Earth," Chen said simply. "We're refugees in the truest sense, but not from ecological collapse. Earth is our sanctuary world, but it's not our home." The holographic display activated, showing star charts that extended far beyond the galactic rim into the void where the ancient station waited. "Our species originated in what you would call the predecessor civilization," Chen continued. "The builders of that station were the descendants of the last survivors of a galactic empire that fell 4 million years ago." Admiral Cathara struggled to process this revelation. "That's impossible. Human biology, your evolutionary history, everything about your species indicates natural development on Earth. Engineered development, Chen corrected. Our ancestors spent millions of years adapting themselves to survive on the sanctuary worlds they had established throughout various galaxies. Earth was one of dozens of hidden refuges where our people could evolve and develop without attracting attention from the forces that destroyed our original civilization. The truth that Captain Chen revealed challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about human nature and capabilities. The predecessor civilization had been a galactic empire that spanned multiple galaxies and had achieved technology that bordered on godlike. But their very success had attracted the attention of something that came from beyond normal space, entities that existed partially outside the conventional universe and viewed advanced civilizations as threats to be eliminated. The war lasted for 30,000 years, Chen explained, as the holographic display showed images recovered from deep archives. Our ancestors fought with technology that could reshape matter at the quantum level and manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. But the enemy they faced existed partially outside reality itself. Conventional physics couldn't touch them. The predecessor civilization had ultimately realized that they couldn't win through direct confrontation. Their final strategy had been to scatter their population across hidden sanctuary worlds throughout the universe, with each group engineered to develop along different evolutionary paths, while maintaining the capacity to eventually reunite when the time was right. Earth was designed to produce humans optimized for survival in hostile conditions, Chen continued. Every challenge our planet presented, ice ages, predators, natural disasters, even the development of warfare among our own species, was intended to create a subspecies capable of surviving anything the universe could present. This explained every aspect of human nature that had confused galactic observers. Human aggression wasn't primitive savagery. It was the result of millions of years of engineering designed to produce survivors. Human technological development wasn't lucky improvisation. It was the gradual awakening of genetic memories left by the most advanced civilization in galactic history. Most importantly, human strategic thinking wasn't learned behavior. It was the inherited wisdom of a species that had once fought a war across multiple galaxies. The signal from the station? Admiral Cathara asked, though she was beginning to understand. A recall signal, activated when one of our species achieved spaceflight and made contact with galactic civilization, Chen confirmed. The station contains archives and technology left by our ancestors, waiting for the day when humanity was ready to reclaim our heritage. The boarding of the ancient station took place 12 hours later, with Captain Chen leading the joint exploration team through corridors that had been waiting 4 million years for human footsteps. The station's systems responded to her presence with recognition protocols that had been dormant since before galactic civilization began. What the exploration team discovered in the station's archives rewrote the history of the galaxy itself. The predecessor civilization had seeded life throughout the galaxy, guiding the development of dozens of species that would become the foundation of modern galactic civilization. The technology that every galactic species considered their greatest achievement was actually the faintest echo of predecessor science, preserved in genetic memories and archaeological artifacts. But the archives also contained warnings. The enemy that had destroyed the predecessor civilization still existed in the spaces between realities, waiting for advanced civilizations to develop far enough to attract their attention. The mathematical signal that had drawn the expedition to the station wasn't just a recall beacon. It was also a danger signal indicating that the ancient enemy had begun stirring again. The galaxy's current level of technological development is approaching the threshold that originally triggered the war, Chen explained to the assembled expedition leaders as they absorbed the implications of what they had learned. Within a century, maybe less, galactic civilization will advance far enough to attract their attention again. This revelation transformed the galaxy's understanding of humanity's role in galactic civilization. The species that had been dismissed as weak refugees were actually the descendants of the most powerful civilization in galactic history, engineered specifically to defend against threats that conventional military forces couldn't comprehend. So, all of this, Admiral Cathara said, gesturing to encompass humanity's infiltration of galactic civilization, was preparation for another war? Not preparation, Chen corrected. Reconnaissance. We needed to understand galactic civilization's capabilities and limitations before revealing ourselves. When the enemy returns, survival will depend on coordination between all galactic species, but that cooperation has to be based on truth rather than assumptions. The months that followed saw the most dramatic transformation in galactic history as humanity revealed the true extent of their capabilities. The primitive mining colonies were revealed as advanced manufacturing centers producing technology that exceeded galactic standards by generations. The simple exploration vessels were revealed as ships capable of operations in dimensions beyond normal spacetime. Most shocking of all, Earth itself was revealed as a fortress world equipped with planetary defense systems that could repel invasions from entities existing partially outside reality. Humanity's integration into galactic civilization had never been about conquest or domination. It had been about assessment and preparation. The galaxy needed to be united and technologically advanced enough to survive what was coming, but it also needed species capable of thinking in ways that conventional galactic civilization couldn't match. "Your ancestors designed you perfectly, Doctor," Voss observed during one of the many conferences that followed humanity's revelation. "A species that could survive anywhere, adapt to any condition, and fight in ways that no enemy could predict." Captain Chen nodded thoughtfully. "But we also designed ourselves to value cooperation over conquest, understanding over domination. The war that destroyed our ancestors was lost partly because the predecessor civilization had become too proud to accept help from others. We won't make that mistake. The ancient station became the center of the largest scientific and military cooperation in galactic history, as hundreds of species worked together to understand predecessor technology and prepare defenses against the returning enemy. Humanity served as guides and teachers, sharing knowledge that had been preserved in genetic memories and hidden archives for 4 million years. But they also learned from galactic civilization. The diversity of species that had evolved in the galaxy represented capabilities and perspectives that even the predecessor civilization had never achieved. The combination of ancient knowledge with modern innovation created possibilities that neither could have achieved alone. 5 years after the discovery of the station, long-range sensors detected the first signs of the ancient enemy's return, reality distortions in the void between galaxies that indicated entities beginning to manifest in normal spacetime. But this time, the galaxy was ready. The combined fleet that assembled to meet the threat represented every species in galactic civilization, equipped with technology that merged predecessor science with modern innovation. Humanity provided strategic leadership and specialized equipment designed for extra-dimensional warfare, but they fought alongside allies whose diverse capabilities created tactical possibilities that exceeded anything their ancestors had imagined. The war that followed lasted 3 years and was fought across multiple dimensions of reality. But when it ended, the ancient enemy had been not just defeated but permanently banished from this region of the universe. The galaxy had achieved something that the predecessor civilization never managed: complete victory over forces that existed partially outside reality itself. In the aftermath of victory, galactic civilization faced the question of what came next. Humanity's revelation had shattered many assumptions about evolution, technology, and the nature of intelligence itself. The galaxy had learned that strength could come from apparent weakness, that the most dangerous opponents were often the ones who didn't look dangerous, and that survival sometimes required cooperation between species that had nothing in common except the will to continue existing. Captain Chen, now serving as humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, stood before the assembly that had once dismissed her species as primitive refugees. The chamber was filled with representatives of species that had learned to see beyond surface appearances, to value diverse approaches to problems, and to understand that sometimes the greatest strength came from admitting weakness. "The galaxy has learned something that our ancestors never understood," she said in her closing address to the Council. "No single species, no matter how advanced, can face the challenges of existence alone. Our strength comes not from our individual capabilities, but from our willingness to combine our different approaches to create solutions that none of us could achieve separately." The applause that followed was more than ceremonial recognition. It was the sound of a galaxy that had learned to value cooperation over competition, diversity over uniformity, and wisdom over raw power. Humanity had achieved their ultimate goal, not dominance over galactic civilization, but integration with it. They had revealed their true nature not to inspire fear, but to demonstrate that strength and weakness were often the same thing viewed from different perspectives. The species that had been assumed to be weak had proven that weakness could be the foundation of strength, that limitations could become advantages, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones that had learned to cooperate with their prey. And in the end, the galaxy was stronger because it had learned to see beyond assumptions, to value what others dismissed, and to understand that evolution's greatest achievement wasn't the creation of apex predators. It was the development of species wise enough to know when not to be predators at all. The war was over. Humanity had come home. And the galaxy had learned that sometimes the best way to be strong was to admit that you were weak. At least weak compared to what you could become when you stopped fighting each other and started fighting for each other instead.